Today, we're going to dive into a pretty unsettling idea from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. In a short passage from his work, The Gay Science, he tackles this profound puzzle. Why do we so often accept our own chains? So let's just start with that big question. Why do so many people put up with lives of, grueling labor and submission, even when it seems like they have the power to change things? And this isn't just about economics. For Nietzsche, the answer was way more personal and, honestly, a lot more disturbing. And here's Nietzsche's big, kind of counterintuitive answer. He says the most powerful prisons aren't made of iron bars at all. The strongest chains are the ones we forge inside our own minds. He argued the biggest barrier to freedom isn't some external oppressor, but an internal lack of what he called a sense of power. To really get this, we need to dig into the core of his argument. And that brings us to a concept he called intellectual poverty. And it's probably not what you're thinking.
See, the crucial point here is that Nietzsche isn't talking about being poor in the financial sense. Intellectual poverty is a poverty of the spirit. It's a state where you're so wrapped up in the daily grind that you literally lose the ability to even imagine a different way of living. Your duties feel as fixed and unchangeable as the law of gravity.
So yeah, this distinction is absolutely crucial. Material poverty is a lack of stuff. Intellectual poverty is a lack of vision. It's a state where the spirit becomes, in Nietzsche's own words, shriveled, serving only the most basic, immediate needs for survival.
And this has some really profound effects. You lose what Nietzsche calls a noble discontent. That healthy dissatisfaction that actually drives real change. Instead, you're just focused on getting through the day. This mental state is what keeps people trapped and what maintains a stable but ultimately uninspired workforce.
But okay, this internal prison doesn't just build itself in a vacuum. Nietzsche argues that external forces, what he calls the teachers of the object of existence, play a huge role in reinforcing these mental chains, usually by putting a kind of moral mask on suffering. I mean, think about it. How often do we hear about the dignity of work? Nietzsche would say that this phrase, even though it sounds positive, is actually a really powerful tool. It can reframe exploitation as something virtuous, hiding its true nature from the very people who are living through it.
Nietzsche called this whole thing the theater of morality, and he said it basically works in 3 steps. First, you frame hardship as a noble path. Second, you teach people to find a kind of heroic pride in their own submission. And the result? You stop that natural resentment from erupting into a revolution. It's a brilliant, if, pretty cynical system of control.
This brings us to what might be the most paradoxical part of this whole idea, the way we can actually become complicit in our own subjugation. Not through weakness, but through a really strange kind of pride.
Nietzsche noticed what he called a vanity in hardworking people. It's that pride someone takes in being tough, and being able to endure whatever gets thrown at them. It feels like a source of strength, almost like a badge of honor.
But here's the twist. Nietzsche says this pride isn't really a strength. It's a symptom of that intellectual poverty we were just talking about. It's a psychological defense mechanism. You take all that will to power and you turn it inward, focusing it on the virtue of endurance. It makes you feel noble in your submission. But what it also does, crucially, is it stops you from ever asking the most dangerous question of all. Why? Why do things have to be this way?
And this creates what Nietzsche saw as the great tragedy of the modern world. People become masters of the shallows. They're experts at the day-to-day tasks of survival. But in doing that, they remain strangers to the depths of their own potential. It's a life of being constantly busy, but that busyness just masks a fundamental emptiness.
So, is there a way out of this prison of the mind? For Nietzsche, yes, but it is not an easy path. It involves awakening something he considered actually quite dangerous, an intellectual conscience. This is a key part of his whole project of A Gay Science, his philosophy of joyful wisdom and radical questioning.
So what is an intellectual conscience? It's the relentless drive to question everything. It's the refusal to just accept that your circumstances are necessary without demanding proof. It is, basically, the courage to write the laws for your own life instead of just following the commands of somebody else.
And you can probably see why this would be so dangerous to the status quo. If everyone suddenly started demanding a good reason for why things are the way they are, Nietzsche believed the entire social hierarchy could just collapse. The system is built on the assumption that most people simply won't ask those dangerous questions, because deep down, the herd is often afraid of its own freedom.
And that, right there, is the whole point of his philosophy, his gay science. It's not about finding comfortable truths, it's about provoking a transformative, and yeah, a potentially disruptive self-awareness.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway from all this? For Nietzsche, real poverty isn't a lack of money, it's a lack of the gay science, that joyful wisdom to question and even laugh at so-called unconditional truth. The goal is to define your own existence, apart from the herd. Because real wealth isn't about what you own, it's the power to be the master of your own fate.
And that brings us to the final thought, a question Nietzsche is really leaving for us to think about. Look at your own life, your job, your duties. What are the unconditional truths that you live by? And what do you think might happen if you found the courage to really question them?